China's debt crisis. How Xi Jinping's debt diplomacy boomeranged. Nearly 44% of China's gross domestic product is held in debt, and the country's local governments owe nearly 5.14 trillion yuan. Provinces and local governments in China are currently dealing with an unpleasant position as a result of the slowdown in the economy and the collapse of revenue from land sales. Spectators are aware of the irony that China is currently caught in a debt trap similar to that of so many countries that have been destroyed along its Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. In this video, we'll discuss China's debt crisis and how it's affecting other nations as well as China itself. Authorities around the nation are suffering under mounds of debt as a result of 3 years of severe economic controls in China and a real estate meltdown. The issue has gotten so bad that some communities can no longer offer essential services and default danger is growing. Analysts believe that China's total outstanding government debt exceeded 123 trillion yuan, $18 trillion last year, with over $10 trillion of that amount being hidden debt owed by riskier local government financing platforms backed by cities or provinces. Regional governments are reportedly decreasing wages, transportation services, and fuel subsidies amid a hard winter as a result of mounting financial strain. In a word, this is what led to the current situation. China went around the world pumping money into economies that were not robust to buy their loyalty. In some cases, it worked, but in many more, the money sank. Now the countries cannot pay back, and China needs the cash because its cities are sinking under the weight of debt. We are talking about trillions of dollars here in unsustainable loans. Money that China wants to recover, but is unable to pay. This story has 3 parts. Number 1, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, the centerpiece of Xi Jinping's foreign policy. Also a weapon for the Chinese state to extend its debt trap, while that weapon has backfired. Belt and Road is now built and roadblocks the projects are stuck because partner countries are not being able to manage their debt. So China has been forced to give out bailouts, and it's not worrisome. Number 2, the 128 bailouts with a total value of $240 billion were provided, the majority of which were made possible by BRI. A significant portion of these bailouts were only provided after the year 2017. BRI began in 2013. The pattern may be seen fairly plainly. From 2019 and 2021, China provided financial assistance totaling $104 billion. Because of China's Belt and Road Initiative, the number of China's bad loans has increased. Now look at the nations that have received these loans. Argentina, Belarus, Suriname, Sri Lanka, Turkey. In terms of their geographic locations, Ukraine and Venezuela, China have covered a lot of ground, and these countries may be located on various continents, but they all share 2 things in common. First, they all received loans from China, and second, they all received loans from the IMF. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, is referred to as the lender of last resort. What does it tell you? That China is exploiting developing economies, is piling them with more debt, and it gives money even when the risks are clear. A bank might not lend to some of these countries because they may not be able to service their debt, but China throws its checkbook at them. Then, when they default and are unable to pay, China lends them more cash in some cases and extends the tenure of the loans in other cases, essentially kicking the can further down the road. I'll illustrate my point using 2 examples, Sri Lanka and Zambia. This is the second part of our narrative. 1 year into Sri Lanka's suffering, China has just agreed to discuss the plan and how much money. Are we talking about how much money does Sri Lanka owe China's $7.4 billion? This was till the enactment of the debt restructuring. The same thing is happening in Zambia. The government is suffocating under a mountain of debt owed to China totaling $6 billion. This was the case up until the end of 2021, just like it was the case with Sri Lanka. A rescue from the IMF is necessary for Zambia, just as it is for Sri Lanka. China is stepping in to help Zambia restructure its debt, but China is imposing additional requirements on the country. Just last month, China stated that the World Bank should be part of the process. China is pressuring Zambia to restructure its debt. This is what Zambia's finance minister said, and I'm quoting him. Discussions at high levels like those just make our situation worse because what we're looking for is urgent solutions, not discussions that may drag out the matter. He was referring to China here. So it's safe to say that Beijing is the villain in Zambia's story as well as Sri Lanka's story. And if it knows this, then it should ask itself why it does not give debt relief to these countries, because doing so would mean that China is the largest bilateral creditor in the world. As of 2020, China has lent approximately $1.5 trillion, and this money has gone to more than 150 countries. Imagine having to waive off $1.5 trillion in loans, and I must say this here, not all countries want to waiver at this point, but if you make an exception for some, others may expect it so. This is about setting a precedent and setting expectations, and China cannot afford it because its citizens cannot afford it. China is the largest bilateral creditor in the world as of 2020 China. They have a massive debt pile, and when I say massive, I mean something on the order of $5 trillion. You heard that right, $5 trillion. In 2022, local governments in China had loans worth more than $5 trillion. Now they're looking for new ways to raise cash, and new loans are out of the question, because Beijing has issued strict orders that prohibit local governments from taking out new loans. Listen to this. We should prevent a buildup of new debts while also working to reduce existing ones. They should, but the question is how you cannot export your way out of this. China cannot revive its economy without fixing its debt problem, and is the top focus of the government right now. They are approaching 2023, or whatever is left of the year, as the year to ensure the revival of the Chinese economy. A new premier has been nominated by Xi Jinping, and his primary duty will be to get China's economy back on track. This debt burden is like a house of cards. All it takes is one misstep or one poor judgment for it to collapse. Crashing down email exchanges from within the BBC, they discuss the possibility of violating Indian laws. It is simpler to stir up the discussion around freedom of speech, but does this give anyone permission to willfully violate the law? This is how geopolitics works. The United States supports India because it requires help and cooperation from India, and India collaborates with the United States because it is in India's best advantage to do so. Netanyahu was faced with a fresh challenge today, as it appears that his cabinet has turned against him, even though he was able to resolve a crisis that he had been having with his defense minister the night before. India looks to be bargaining from a position of power like a partner and not a former colony. Thank you. The United States and Russia are dangerously close to a military conflict this year, 2023. The United Kingdom is looking at the Indian subcontinent to replenish its coffers. New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, as a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC, a list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries: number 1, The Kohinoor, and The Colonial Loot; number 2, An Outdated Monarchy, An Unhealthy Obsession. Do you like it? Kindly give your valuable response in our comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and informative videos.